Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Masseter and Temporalis video. Masseter and temporalis are muscles of mastication, which means chewing. Okay. Masseter itself is the strongest muscle in the body relative to its size, which means that it's not the biggest, but it is the strongest. Masseter has two overlapping bellies and they sit right about here. And you can actually feel them very strongly when you clench your teeth together. So if you put your fingers right about here, just anterior to your ear, you can see it pushing my finger out. That's masseter, okay? Temporalis sits in the temporal fossa of the temporal bone. It's just that little dip on either side of your skull. Temporalis is also a muscle of mastication as it elevates the mandible. And if you put your fingers just above your ear and maybe a little anterior, and also clench your jaw, you can see temporalis engage as well. So let's take a look at these. All right, kind of like this guy. Here's some nasal cartilage, and see he has some weird ear cartilage going on here. Not sure about that. Whatever. And these muscles are ridiculously outsized, but it's okay too. So look, this right here is temporalis. This right here is masseter. And I know it looks like this muscle comes down underneath the zygomatic arch and inserts here. It does not. That's a weird view. This muscle comes down and inserts onto the masseter, or I'm sorry, onto the mandible. And this is a totally separate muscle over here. Okay, so this is temporalis right here. This is the masseter muscle. And as I said, it has two overlapping bellies. So here's the superficial belly, here's the deep belly. Okay, let's take a look at masseter. So as I mentioned, masseter is the strongest muscle in the body relative to its size, with nearly 150 pounds of pressure. That's enough to bite off a finger. That's a lot. Not nearly as strong as some other creatures, however. Does anybody know who has the strongest bite force in the animal kingdom? If you said crocodile, you are correct. It is the crocodile, has the strongest bite per square inch, exactly. You know, its force of pressure. I believe theirs is about 1,500 pounds per square inch. So kind of a bit more than us. That's all right. The masseter muscle is used for mastication, which again is chewing, but also for speech production. We have to move our mandible up and down in order to form syllables and speak. All right, so origin and insertion. Just to give you a visual idea before we talk about it, the insertion is going to be on the ramus of the mandible. Okay. And again, there's the superficial belly that's cut, and there's the deep belly here. However, we don't talk about the masseter in terms of muscle bellies because they are in the exact same spot. It's just one muscle, the masseter. Okay. It originates on the zygomatic arch and inserts on the angle and ramus of the mandible. So the angle is this part here, if you recall. This is the angle. And then, of course, the ramus. So what does it do? Well, we already know that it elevates the mandible because we just said so. Elevation of the mandible is when you bring the mandible superiorly. But really, the only way to elevate the mandible is to first depress it. So elevation. may assist to protract the mandible. So protraction, if you recall, looks like this. It's when you move the mandible forward, okay, along the transverse plane. Protraction. The masseter is innervated by the trigeminal nerve, and you see this Roman numeral here. The trigeminal nerve is part of that cranial nerve package that I mentioned in a previous video. So a lot of the muscles of the face and some of the muscles of the neck are innervated by cranial nerves. All right, so we use our masseter, of course, in chewing and in speaking, right? Gnashing your teeth during an argument. Incidentally, the word masseter comes from the Greek word meaning chewer, obviously, right? That makes so much sense. But it doesn't work alone. It works with temporalis. Temporalis, as I mentioned, sits in this temporal fossa, which isn't just on the temporal bone. It's kind of made up of 4 different bones. It's the narrow part of your skull here, where it makes a bit of a dip on either side. Temporalis fills in that whole area. Okay. Whoops, I need to go back a page. Here we are, temporalis. Okay, so temporalis is a broad, flat muscle, and it's not nearly as strong as masseter, but it does assist in elevating the mandible with the masseter, okay? This particular muscle sits pretty flush in the temporal fossa here, and like I said, since it's flat, the only time that you can really palpate temporalis and feel it moving is when you do the action. Otherwise, when you press in here, it might be tender, but it's hard to feel the muscle belly. It just kind of feels like skull, okay? Even though it's entirely superficial, it's just that flat. So temporalis originates in the temporal fossa, like I said, and inserts then on the coronoid process of the mandible, and also a little bit on the edge of the ramus. So just about here, okay? Now, remember I said that there is muscle that fills in that hole, that arch here. Well, this is the muscle that fills it in, okay? So temporalis dips between the zygomatic arch and the bone, and the temporal bone, and again, there's other bones in there. But it goes down in through there and then inserts on the coronoid process. Now, temporalis elevates the mandible. Of course it does, we just said that. But this one retracts the mandible. So masseter could protract the mandible. Temporalis retracts the mandible. So protraction, retraction, protraction, retraction, okay? So they are not true synergists because one protracts the mandible, one retracts the mandible. However, they do act together in elevation of the mandible. Temporalis is also innervated by the trigeminal nerve, again, that cranial set. And temporalis, the word, actually refers to time. Okay, temporal is a Latin word meaning time. And the reason that this particular muscle is named temporalis, referring to time, is because right through here, you might be able to see mine, I don't know. This is where you start to get gray hairs. So you can see the passage of time in the gray hairs as reflected in the temporalis area. So that's why that word, that muscle is named for time. It's pretty wild. I know you can see them up here, but I guess you can see a little bit over here. When I don't dye my hair, you can see them starting in here. The little gray hairs. wisdom highlights, if you will. All right, so masseter and temporalis assist each other in elevation of the mandible, and they are muscles of mastication. All right, that's it for this video. Have a nice day.